That day, thousands of people had gathered in Ouagadougou's central market. Ibrahim Traoré was giving a speech about the country's future during a public meeting. In the front rows of the crowd, 84-year-old Yaba Tant stood upright. This strong woman was listening carefully to Traoré's every word while clutching the shining gold bracelets in her hands. When the speech ended, the elderly woman walked forward and spoke in a trembling voice that everyone could hear, "For this country." She was taking off her gold bracelets and offering them to Traoré one by one. These bracelets were her 50-year savings, the only memories left from her husband, but her belief that Traoré would save Burkina Faso was so strong that she was ready to sacrifice her most valuable possessions. Traoré's eyes filled with tears. At that moment, everyone in the market was crying. No one knew that 3 days later, Yaba Tant's sacrifice would lead to the greatest miracle in Burkina Faso's history. Yaba Tant's real name was Mariam Savadogo, and her story was a living chronicle of Burkina Faso's modern history. Born in 1940, when the country was still called Upper Volta as a French colony, she had witnessed her country's struggles throughout every period of her life. She had spent her childhood under the strict rules of the colonial period, seen independence struggles in her youth, supported Thomas Sankar's revolutionary ideals in middle age, and in her old age believed that her country had found new hope under Ibrahim Traoré's leadership. Yaba's gold bracelets carried more than just material value. Each one held a memory, a story from different periods of her life. The first bracelet was a gift from her husband Amadou when they married in 1960. At that time, Burkina Faso had newly gained independence, and the young couple held great hopes for the future. The second bracelet was bought by her husband when their first child was born. The third was from the day their son finished school. The fourth was the last gift they bought when Amadou retired from the gold mine where he worked. Each of these gold pieces came from Burkina Faso's local resources. Amadou had worked in the gold mines in the north of the country for 40 years, collecting gold bit by bit every day to buy small gifts for his family. At that time, most mines were controlled by foreign companies, but workers could sometimes set aside small pieces. Amadou's collected gold was obtained this way, with patience and labor. Yaba's attachment to her gold bracelets was not only due to their material value. These bracelets were symbols of her husband's love, her family's history, and her own identity. When Amadou passed away in 2018 from age-related illnesses, these gold pieces were the only material memories Yaba had left. Her children had grown up and focused on their own lives. Yaba lived alone, trying to get by on a modest pension. She had followed Traoré's rise to leadership through television news. This young soldier's courage, determination, and devotion to the people had deeply affected her. Especially Traoré's stance against French neo-colonialism was giving voice to feelings Yaba had carried inside for years. She was a representative of a generation that had lived through the colonial period, witnessed independence being won, but then saw that the country was still under the influence of foreign powers. Traoré's policies, especially his determination regarding the nationalization of gold mines, reminded Yaba of her husband's dreams. Amadou always said that these mines belonged to the people of Burkina Faso, that it was wrong for foreign companies to exploit the wealth. Now a young leader had emerged, trying to turn these thoughts into reality. Before the Sunday speech, Yaba had thought for a long time. She had heard in television news that Traoré mentioned financial difficulties. The country needed great resources for modernization, strengthening the army, and improving education and health systems. The country was facing financial hardship due to the effects of the French economic embargo. That night Yaba made a decision. In the morning, she put on her gold bracelets, wore her best dress, and went to the market. While listening to Traoré's speech, she had seen his sincerity, patriotism, and determination. This young leader was truly fighting for the country, and Yaba wanted to support him. The moment of giving the gold to Traoré had deeply affected thousands of people in the market. The elderly woman's courage, sacrifice, and trust in Traoré had moved everyone. But the real impact began after this moment was broadcast in the media. The footage was broadcast repeatedly on television, went viral on social media, and appeared in newspaper headlines. The first reaction came from other elderly women in the market. Yaba's friends and neighbors were inspired by her courage. The next day, dozens of elderly women collected gold, silver, and valuable items from their homes and took them to the presidential palace. Each one, like Yaba, wanted to make sacrifices for their country. On the second day, the movement spread to young people as well. University students, unemployed graduates, and young farmers were collecting their small possessions. They wanted to donate the money they obtained by selling their smartphones, bicycles, and jewelry to the state. The slogan "If 84-year-old Yaba Tant can do it, why can't we?" was echoing throughout the country. On the third day, the movement became a nationwide phenomenon. From cities to villages, from towns to the most remote settlements, people everywhere wanted to contribute. Farmers were donating part of that year's harvest, merchants a certain percentage of their daily earnings, and civil servants were making deductions from their salaries to donate. These images had a great impact not only in Burkina Faso but throughout Africa. Support messages began coming from neighboring countries Mali, Niger, and Ghana. Burkina, living in the African diaspora in Europe and America, was sending money. The movement became a continental solidarity campaign. Economists and political scientists tried to analyze the magnitude of this spontaneously emerging movement. There were similar examples in history: people supporting their state during wartime, collective sacrifices during national liberation periods. But such a widely participated, spontaneously developing movement was very rare. International media also showed great interest in the event. Channels like BBC, CNN, and France 24 sought to interview Yabatant. However, the elderly woman humbly declined these offers. She said she was just a patriotic Burkina Faso citizen and hadn't done anything special. The total amount of donations was growing rapidly. By the end of the first week, the collected amount had reached $50 million in value. In the second week, it exceeded 100 million. Gold, silver, cash, checks, bank transfers, cryptocurrency. All kinds of donations were coming in. The government announced that these resources would be used transparently and would be accountable to the people. Traoré was very affected by this event. His people's trust and support both made him proud and burdened him with great responsibility. He hosted Yabatant at the palace, thanked her, and explained how he would use the gold she had given. The elderly woman was happy. Seeing that the movement she had created was benefiting her country so much pleased her. The collected resources were used in strategic projects. Part was allocated to strengthening the education system, building hospitals and schools. Another part was spent on modernizing the agricultural sector and developing technology infrastructure. The most important part was used to increase the country's defense capacity. The most valuable result of this movement was even more important than material gains: the sense of unity and solidarity that emerged among the people of Burkina Faso. People now saw themselves not just as citizens with individual goals, but as members of a society sharing a common destiny. The movement initiated by Yabatant became a turning point in Burkina Faso's modern history. Yabatant Solidarity Day was declared nationwide. Every year on this day, people contribute to national development within their means, keeping the spirit of sacrifice alive. The 84-year-old elderly woman who gave her gold bracelets could not have predicted the dimensions of the movement she started. She had only wanted to show her love for her country, sacrificing her most valuable possessions. However, this simple act had mobilized millions of people, becoming the beginning of a great transformation that changed the country's destiny. The international repercussions of the movement were also important. World public opinion appreciated the example of unity and sacrifice shown by the people of Burkina Faso. This situation also strengthened the country's hand in foreign policy. Burkina Faso, having gained international respect, became able to participate in negotiations from a stronger position. The economic effects were also enormous. Thanks to the collected resources, the country was able to pay off part of its foreign debts and implement new investment projects. Most importantly, it took significant steps toward economic independence by reducing external dependency. Yabatant's story inspired similar movements in other African countries as well. In Mali, Niger, and Ghana, citizens began contributing within their means for their country's development. Pan-Africanist thinkers emphasized that this movement was the best example that Africa could develop with its own resources. A movement called #Yabatant Challenge started on social media. People were sharing the sacrifices they made for their countries, encouraging others to contribute as well. This digital campaign found worldwide resonance, transcending African borders. Years later, when historians wrote the modern history of Burkina Faso, they recorded the day Yabatant gave her gold bracelets as an important turning point. This event took its place in academic literature as one of the most successful examples of people-based development models. The movement initiated by the elderly woman was not limited to material contributions alone. People began offering their time, skills, and knowledge to their country as well. A culture of volunteerism developed, social solidarity increased, and awareness of solving social problems together strengthened. Yabatant spent the last years of her life in peace. With the satisfaction of seeing the positive results of the sacrifice she had made, she was hopeful about her country's future. When she gave her gold bracelets, she thought she was simply making a material donation, but in reality, she had become the initiator of a massive transformation that mobilized the spirit of an entire nation. The spontaneous nature of the movement made it even more remarkable. Unlike government-organized campaigns or NGO-driven initiatives, this was purely a grassroots phenomenon that emerged from the heart of the people. Political scientists studied it as a rare example of organic civil society mobilization in post-colonial Africa. The psychological impact on the nation was profound. For decades, Many Burkina had felt powerless in the face of economic challenges and foreign interference. Yabatan's gesture and the subsequent national response demonstrated that ordinary citizens could indeed influence their country's trajectory through collective action. Educational institutions across Africa began incorporating the story into their curricula as a case study in civic engagement and patriotism. The narrative became particularly powerful in business schools, where it was used to illustrate how individual actions can create exponential social impact. The movement also had unexpected cultural ramifications. Traditional praise songs were composed celebrating Yabatan's sacrifice, and her story became part of the oral tradition passed down through generations. Artists created paintings, sculptures, and literary works inspired by her gesture, contributing to a renaissance of patriotic cultural expression. International development agencies took note of the phenomenon as well. The success of the grassroots mobilization led to new theoretical frameworks for understanding how external aid could complement rather than replace indigenous resource mobilization efforts. The legacy continued to evolve years after the initial event. Annual commemorations became occasions for national reflection on citizenship, sacrifice, and collective responsibility. Schools organized essay competitions about civic duty, and community organizations used the anniversary to launch local development projects. Perhaps most significantly, Yabatan's action had redefined what it meant to be a patriot in modern Africa. Her example showed that patriotism was not just about supporting leaders or waving flags, but about making tangible sacrifices for collective progress. This understanding influenced how subsequent generations approached their relationship with their country and their role as citizens. The transformation that began with an elderly woman's simple gesture of offering her most precious possessions had grown into a national awakening. It demonstrated that in times of crisis, the solution often lies not in external assistance or complex policy interventions, but in the collective will of people who love their country enough to sacrifice for its future. The miracle that occurred 3 days after Yabatan's sacrifice was not just the mobilization of resources or the international attention it garnered. The real miracle was the rekindling of hope, the restoration of faith in collective action, and the proof that ordinary citizens could be the authors of extraordinary change. In giving away her gold bracelets, Yabatan had given her country something far more valuable: the belief that its people could shape their own destiny.